I'm often criticized on this channel for having lukewarm takes, and I'm sorry to say today I have the lukiest, warmiest take of all time. I don't think Nintendo's that good of a company. Don't get me wrong, I love basically all of Nintendo's IP. It's my childhood, it's nostalgia blasts all around, and I will play most new Nintendo games because I am suckered into that. But although they have this cute, cuddly front that everybody loves, they have a much dark, seedier backside where they do their more formal business dealings. And oftentimes, they punish people disproportionately to the amount of damage done to them. And we have two stories that I think perfectly encapsulate that we need to talk about today. It's kind of like if Nintendo was a sentient teddy bear. And although they're cute and cuddly, the sentient teddy bear only says slurs, which I think is the plot to the movie Ted, but I've never seen it. Anyway, let's get into it. Let's talk about the first one, which is about PointCrow, who is a fellow creator who does mainly Breath of the Wild videos, speedrunning content, and he recently went through hell with Nintendo because they took down about 20 or so of his videos. Videos totaling 55 million views were taken down by Nintendo, which was a very calculated move, by the way. Now, it's worth mentioning here that these videos, most of them were modded gameplay videos of Breath of the Wild. Some were also modded gameplay videos of Pokemon, Mario Odyssey, and even Wii Sports Resort. But for the most part, these were calculated takedowns. And there's one weird exception that I think is way too far, and I'll let PointCrow explain.
From my channel. The most surprising one, though, was a claim from one of my first videos back in 2019. Marrying Sidon and a bookshelf to create Hyrule's first car.
Yeah, that's right.
It's just a regular vanilla gameplay video of Breath of the Wild.
They just took down a regular-ass video because I'm pretty sure this was a human hand-picking out somebody to make an example out of for the rest of the YouTube community. Any creators who make content that might include modded stuff can now look to PointCrow as an example of, oh, no, I shouldn't do this, otherwise it could ruin my YouTube career. And I know this was a very calculated decision because Nintendo made the very deliberate choice to hand down with all these takedowns 2 copyright strikes. And by the way, these takedowns aren't done based off them being modded content. They're based off of him using Nintendo's IP. And if you don't know, there is no legality around making playthrough content. It is technically a copyright violation. However, throughout history, gaming companies have realized that most of that playthrough content just aids in making the game more popular, keeping the scene alive for years after it's come out and creating interest for future sequels. And I don't think there is a creator I can think of off the top of my head that has made Breath of the Wild more popular than PointCrow. The guy has been ride or dying that game for literally 5+ years. So for them to make an example out of him and hand him down 2 strikes, which I'm pretty sure was because if they were to hand him 3 strikes, there would be too much of a stink, and 1 strike wouldn't be big enough punishment to threaten his entire career. They're towing the line of bad enough to make an example out of, but not bad enough that they get blowback themselves. But I think it's out of line. I think it's ridiculous to have done that and made an example out of him. And that's a very common theme in Nintendo strategy, making an example out of someone. And you can look no further than the most recent story, which is about a guy called Gary Bowser. Now, this is kind of a finale to this story. You might have heard of this story a couple of years ago. But there's a guy, real name Gary Bowser, who was sentenced to 40 months in prison for operating a hacking team that basically allowed you to hack your Nintendo Switch. And oftentimes, through that hack, play pirated games. That's not the only thing you can do, but that is a lot of what was being done. And they would sell this hack to people, and Gary Bowser was the fall guy for Team Executor who made this thing. Now, this team has a long and storied history. I think it was originally created by like Paul Owen with Xbox hacks in the early 2000s. Eventually, it was sold to this French guy named Max, and then that French guy named Max looped in Gary Bowser, a Canadian. There's a 3-pronged dragon that's been doing all this hacking in recent time for the Nintendo Switch and 3DS, which involves Gary, Max, and a Chinese citizen called Yuan. But the only guy who got in any trouble at all is Gary. Why? Well, I think because he's the only one that they could actually punish. They weren't able to extradite the other 2. And so because of that, they laid absolute hell on this man. He was not only charged with 40 months in prison, but also paying back Nintendo $14.5 million, which is insane. Gary in court said he earned just over $300,000 from this venture, and although Team Executor as a whole earned millions, Gary only saw about, a few $100,000 of it. So for him to be paying back what is basically 40 times more is crazy. How do they plan on getting that money back now that Gary's out of prison? Well, simple. They're going to take 25 to 30% of his salary for the rest of his life. That's it. That's it. And if you're curious, this is what Gary Bowser looks like. This is Gary Bowser. And then here, he's basically the Dark Chow version of Doug Bowser. This is Doug Bowser, who's actually the head of Nintendo. Anyway, he has to pay back the $14.5 million, which thankfully he's already chewed a bit through because he was able to pay back some of the money while working in prison, specifically $175. That's it. He was able to pay $175 because, well, let's be honest, most prison jobs is basically slave labor, but that's a different conversation. And this is Nintendo's own lawyers saying Nintendo wanted hackers' prison sentence to turn heads. They basically wanted this prison sentence to stop people from doing modded gameplay and make an example out of Gary that would maybe stop modding and hacking as a whole. And that's because this is the only guy they were able to get their hands on. Max, the guy who actually owns Team Executor after buying it from Paul Allen in 2017, can't have shit done to him. When the French courts were dealing with Nintendo suing Max, they said, nah. Actually, the judge said that Nintendo should allow a more open development policy with its systems, like Microsoft has done with Windows, where anyone can develop for the OS. And the U.S. has not been successful in extraditing him. So although he has lost cases in California and Hong Kong, and he is technically supposed to pay Nintendo tens and tens of millions of dollars, he'll probably never have to do it. He can just lay low and then start hacking again in a few months, which is what will happen. And then Gary Bowser, who was just working for this company for a little bit, is going to basically be the poster boy for Nintendo. Now, it's also worth noting two things here. One, Team Executor, not exactly the most upright team of hackers. It's not like they are freedom fighters. They basically took open source software and made it more accessible to people and marketed it better than other people to get a shit ton of sales. And they basically had like licensing fees that you had to pay for and buying their like little tools that you could use. I don't know the ins and outs of it. I don't hack my shit. I just play the goddamn game on stream and suck at it. But basically they took free source stuff and made it paywalled, which is a bit cringe. But I think the punishment way outweighs what the actual crime was in this instance. I don't think Gary Bowser should have 25 to 30% of his salary for the rest of his life taken out and be expected to pay $14.5 million when he earned himself just over $300K. Maybe he pays back what he earned. That'd make a little more sense to me, rather than an impossible number that he will never be able to pay back. That seems, I don't know, that seems a little unfair. Nintendo's kind of like an older sibling, where you, as the younger sibling, hit them, maybe slightly, you push them, you do something you shouldn't have, and then the older sibling hits you with the wrath of God, 1000x returns whatever damage you've done to them until you are crying, bruised, and have scars for the rest of your life. That's Nintendo. That's how they operate behind the scenes. By the way, has any of this stopped hacking? No. Fuck no. No, if anything, this subreddit, which is, the hub, Switch Pirates, of hacking for Nintendo Switch, is bigger than ever. It's literally bigger. I went by top posts and it's booming. I was looking through this for a while. Everyone's hacking that shit. A lot of people in here are pirating. Not trying to narc, more so just saying that it was not successful at all. They just ruined a guy's life to feel like they did something behind closed doors without actually doing anything. The bigger thing that was able to stop pirating was just releasing new Switches with tougher things to crack. The new Nintendo Switches, most people say the new firmwares are very hard to crack. And the best way to hack a Switch is to just have an old one and have luck that you have an old one you never updated. That's literally it. So anyway, that's all I want to say. Nintendo kind of cringe. Lukewarm take, but two interesting stories. Go check out PointCrow's video. Shout out Gary Bowser and see you later. Goodbye. Have a good one. Goodbye.